Hello you beautiful misfits, my name is Matt and this is Pixel Burn, where I normally take a snarky look at the week's gaming news, except with this year having been a near perpetual dirge of misery and death, I thought, why not try and end things on a more positive note? Because I'm not just a one-note roiling ball of sarcasm and scorn. Believe it or not, I do actually like video games, and I liked many of the video games that happened to be released this year, even if only as a distraction from the ambient horror and despair permeating our forsaken world like a tampon soaked in sewage. I mean, for fuck's sake, we lost David Bowie this year, as well as Prince, Gene Wilder, Victoria Wood, Ron Glass, Alan Rickman, and too many more. Not forgetting, of course, Carrie Fisher. Basically, if 2016 were an actual person with limbs and whatnot, we'd be well within our rights to drag it into a dark alleyway and each take turns smashing its hateful fucking face in with a hammer until its teeth were scattered all over the ground like a spilled box of Tic Tacs. A bit like Murder on the Orient Express, with hammers. Anyhow, to do my part in trying to end 2016 on a more positive, uplifting note, I hereby present to you the 100% entirely subjective, Pixel Burn approved top games of 2016 in no particular order of merit. Aurion, Legacy of the Kori-odan not only brought a splash of much needed vibrancy and colour to this grim year, but also gave me my new favourite video game power couple, in the form of King Enzo and Queen Aurion here. The combat system is satisfyingly similar to Devil May Cry, with all manner of potential for sick combo chains, but it was the story and the memorable characters that kept me captivated right through to the end. A standard reclaim your kingdom plot gradually blossoms into something greater and more world affecting, while simultaneously avoiding some of the more obvious twists you might expect, and also packing in both heartache and humour in equal measure. The game has some rough spots in places, but they're entirely forgivable when you consider Kiro games sometimes had to work without electricity for up to 8 hours at a time. Overall, Aurion, Legacy of the Kori-odan is a strong debut made with genuine love and passion that is more than worthy of your time. You all knew this one was coming, didn't you? Despite my frankly diabolical initial experiences where I spent innumerable godforsaken hours trying to get the damn thing to even run, once I did get it working, it was almost everything I wanted from a Dishonored sequel. Bigger environments to explore, the kind of environmental storytelling I've loved since I played Thief for the first time, as well as more powers and toys to play with. The overall story feels weaker than Dishonored, however, which is itself impressive, given you could see the twist coming from a mile off in the first game. A couple of the antagonists also aren't as memorable as the first game's Lord Regent or High Overseer Campbell, although the ones that do stand out, like the Grand Inventor of Serkonos, whose clockwork mansion is a joy to explore, do so with aplomb. Each mission also plays pretty much the same as either Emily or Corvo, with the only differences being cutscenes, situational dialogue, and how you traverse the environments. It would have been nice to have some different side objectives depending on which character you selected. Nevertheless, Dishonored 2 has earned a place among my favourite games of the year in spite of these criticisms. Criticisms that can always be addressed in Dishonored 3, eh Arcane? I mean, you are going to give us more stories set in this lovely engrossing world you've created, right? Right? Please? Can we at the very least look forward to some story-based DLC like Dishonored's Knife of Dunwall and Brigmore Witches expansions? Please? Pretty please? If you love the Homeworld series, you should already own this. If you haven't played Homeworld, then Deserts of Karak is a great introduction to the series, and not just because it's a prequel. For one thing, it mostly ditches that pesky Z-axis that stymied so many potential fans all those years ago, if only because the scrubs couldn't wrap their headmeats around fully three-dimensional warfare like I could. Aside from that, it's 100% undiluted Homeworld in every single way, from the gorgeous rotoscoped cutscenes and strategic goodness to the beautiful Eastern-inspired soundtrack composed by the legendary Paul Ruskay. If you've been looking for a good RTS with an engaging story that isn't about some bad guy only being bad because of some morally convenient external force, yes Chris Metzen, I'm looking at you, then Deserts of Karak has you well and truly covered. It is with abundant shame that I confess I was very late to the Hitman 2016 party, having been dissuaded initially by its episodic release schedule and by how the last instalment, Hitman Absolution, was a rather pale shadow of the series' overall greatness. So I'm very happy to say my skepticism was a mistake for once, because Hitman 2016 is bloody great. The majority of maps are a great size and fun to explore, the opportunity system encourages you to explore different ways of murdering your targets, and the challenge modes encourage oodles of replayability. It's not quite as brilliant as Hitman Blood Money, but then very few games are, and Hitman 2016 is still easily a close second place to it. All in all, a stonking return to form for the series, and I personally can't wait for Season 2. Speaking of a return to form and how, Doom 2016 was a beautiful gore-soaked box of joy, bound in a ribbon of demon intestine tied into a lovely bloody bow. To think id Software almost gave us a plodding Call of Duty style military shooter with demons instead of this delicious, fast-paced crimson ballet of ultra-violence. It's not too short that you feel cheated on the length, and not too long that it outstays its welcome. Plus, the soundtrack will get your blood pumping to all the right places. The multiplayer was a tad bland, albeit serviceable enough, and the snap map feature didn't start out too strong, although has since improved. But none of that matters when you can slice a demon in half with a chainsaw or turn its head into giblets with a double-barreled shotgun. Buy it, play it,
rip and tear until it is done.
Ah, Stellaris. How many hours of my year have you taken from me? The answer to that question, of course, is shitloads. Whether I was playing as a cheap knockoff of The Culture from Ian M. Banks' sci-fi novels, a bunch of Vorlon-esque space fungi who were the only damn ones doing anything about the hostile genocidal invaders from another dimension, or an all-consuming swarm of space cockroaches murdering entire species. It's not quite at the peak of its potential just yet, the diplomacy system in particular could be beefed up, but Paradox supports the hell out of their games with free updates, and I look forward to it being improved further in the future. If you have plenty of hours to spare and want a solid 4X space game with some delicious grand strategy sprinkles on top, then give Stellaris a try. At the very least, it's a really good introduction to Paradox strategy games in general, which can be rather intimidating to most people. Honestly, if you've played Civilization 5, you'll have very little trouble slipping into Stellaris. Yep, you can chalk me up as another of those people putting Blood and Wine on their list. Hey, if Baldur's Gate 2 Throne of Bhaal can win an award for Best RPG of its respective year, so can The Witcher 3 Blood and Wine. While overall not quite as memorable as Hearts of Stone, the story is still a strong one with some great moments, and provides a lovely send-off for the trilogy, as well as for Geralt of Rivia and friends. It also adds a whopping great new region to explore, Tucson, that's absolutely packed with things to see and do, as well as new gear to craft or acquire. If you didn't quite click with The Witcher 3, then Blood and Wine won't change your mind. But if you loved Witcher 3 yet still don't own this, then you should rectify that immediately. If 2015 was the year CD Projekt Red usurped BioWare as the masters of Western CRPGs with The Witcher 3, Blood and Wine in 2016 was their well-earned victory tour. If there was ever a game that nailed H.P. Lovecraft's philosophy of a godless universe in which humanity is completely insignificant, Tharsis would be a prime contender, although it is admittedly one of those Marmite sort of games. If you don't like completely hopeless Kobayashi Maru situations where, despite your best efforts, everyone dies and the ship explodes, then you probably won't like it very much. If, however, you relish the challenge of taking the crappiest hand fate can give you and turning it around into a Pyrrhic victory at the very least, you'll likely get a sweet little kick out of Tharsis. And even if the odds do get so overwhelmingly stacked against you that the only possible result is failure, games are often short enough that you can always jump right back in and try again. In short, Tharsis is perfect for when you have the occasional 15 minutes to kill, or you need a quick reminder of how dispassionately cruel our cold, godless universe can really be. Speaking of cold, godless universes, XCOM 2 takes all the lessons you may have learned in XCOM 1, fashions them into a big stick and then thrashes you with it. It's a sequel that forces you to master some of what you learned from the first game and unlearn the rest, or learn those same lessons anew really bloody quickly. The result is a tough as nails experience where you genuinely feel like a ragtag human insurgency group fighting a desperate battle for freedom against big bad alien overlords. The squad member customization options are also a notable high point, greatly improved from the first game, tremendous fun to play around with and immensely moddable. They're also the nastiest weapon in the game's psychological arsenal, because you can and will spend hours recreating your best friend, your favourite fictional character, or even your mum, only to see them gunned down in a hail of alien plasma fire as soon as they poke their head above cover. XCOM 2 is cruel in its beauty, beautiful in its cruelty, and kinda makes me suspect there might be something wrong with me. Deus Ex Mankind Divided improves on the original in leaps and bounds, particularly in the stealth department. Instead of every stealthy route being some sort of air vent, you've now got windows, canopies, gantries and other more realistic seeming points of entry that make me suspect the developers have been studying some of Dishonored's level design, like that's any sort of crime. You can also talk your way into places or shoot everyone you meet if you like, but for a sneaky ninja pacifist like me, it felt great finishing the whole thing without murdering a single person. My only real gripe, aside from the game being mostly confined to one hub, is how abruptly the story ends, leaving blatant sequel hooks dangling in the wind and generally feeling like the second act of a larger story without a third act of its own. A bit like The Empire Strikes Back, if The Empire Strikes Back ended like this.
The Force is with you, young Skywalker.
Finally, what better representative of this insane year could there be than Dark Souls 3? It is, after all, set in a rotting, broken world populated by empty, joyless husks of humanity, where the light of hope is on the verge of dying out completely and nearly all your favourite people are dead. While it bizarrely takes a few backward steps in places, particularly with the Covenant system and PvP, it also has hands down some of the best boss fights of the series. Notable examples being Aldrich, the Devourer of Gods, the Abyss Watchers and the Dragon Slayer armour, to name but a few. That last one being my personal favourite due to the epic location, the rousing music, solidly challenging yet fair mechanics, and the sheer adrenaline overdose it gave me when I'd finally defeated the clanking metal sod. No joke, I honestly had to go and have a lie down afterwards. And that's all for Pixel Burn for the rest of this miserable Annus Horribilis. If you liked it, the video that is, not this despot of a year, then please do let me know by clicking the requisite button down below and letting your friends, your family and the developers of all these great games know as well. Meanwhile, I hope you had at the very least a tolerable Christmas, and I'll see you all again in the new year. Assuming we don't all die screaming in a ball of nuclear fire before then, eh?